Breaking news concerning that
mini-submersible Titan.
Who's missing in the North Atlantic.
The 5 people that are on board.
Hoping to see the wreck of the Titanic.
On June 18th, 2023, a submarine set for the Titanic went missing, 12,000 foot below the Atlantic Ocean, with 5 people on board. One of them was just 19 years old, and this is his tragic story. Suleman Dawood was a 19-year-old student attending the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. His family, the Dawoods, were considered to be very wealthy. This all stemmed from his grandfather, Seth Ahmad Dawood, who was one of Pakistan's senior industrialists, and by 1933 was the biggest supplier of imported yarn to the textile mills in India. He established and built up the various businesses and industries that make up the Dawood Group in Pakistan, also known as the Dawood Group of Companies, and would be the foundation for the family's growth and success over the years. But these great accomplishments would not overshadow his other family members, and Shahzada Dawood, one of his grandsons, was a perfect example. After his early education, including a law degree from Buckingham University and an MSc in Global Textile Marketing from Philadelphia University, Shahzada would go on to become the vice chairman of the Engro Corporation and a director of the Dawood Hercules Corporation. And in 2012, Dawood was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. The next in line to do great things was Suleman Dawood. After completing his first year of business studies, he was certainly on the right track. Although studying business, Suleman had a fascination for all things science. Ever since he was a boy, he became obsessed with the Rubik's Cube, and would always carry one around with him wherever he went. He actually became extremely good at solving it.
He can fix the cube in 9 seconds, yeah?
Yeah, but that's my best. So
that's your best. Let's see.
15.
So should we give you 20?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if you can fix this in 20 seconds. Starting now. Whoa! Great job!
Sorry, there was a lot of mistakes in that.
Thank you so much, that was great.
His father, Shahzada, was a very adventurous person, and using his vast wealth he was often able to do and see amazing things that would be completely unavailable to the average person. This is known as extreme tourism, and is a lucrative, high-risk industry that seems to be only growing. With enough money, tourists can summit Everest, take a rocket to space, or plumb the depths of the ocean that have largely been off limits for humankind. Shahzada had heard about the Oceangate's Titanic experience, which at the price of $250,000 would allow you to take a tour straight down to the Titanic in a submersible vehicle, specially designed to withstand the high pressures of the deep ocean. Shahzada, with his vast knowledge of pretty much everything, meant he also had an interest in everything, including the deep sea and the history of the Titanic, so a trip like this was something he just couldn't pass up on. At first, Shahzada had arranged to go with his wife to see the Titanic, but the trip ended up getting delayed so many times due to bad weather that in the end she wanted to give her seat to her son, who was completely desperate to go, and Suleman had big plans for the dive. Aside from seeing what only a handful of people in the world have seen, he was going to use his impressive Rubik's Cube solving abilities to break a record. Suleman was going to solve the Rubik's Cube at the lowest depth ever. He had already applied to Guinness World Records, and his father was going to bring a camera to record the event. But the days leading up to the dive, Suleman grew more anxious about the trip and started to get very scared about going. But he really didn't want to let his father down, as he knew how much the trip meant to him. And because of all the delays, the trip was going to happen on Father's Day, which would have only added to Suleman's guilt. At 8 AM on Sunday, June 18th, the father and son, along with 3 other men, would enter the submersible, called the Titan, which was still safely on board the mothership. The other men inside the Titan were Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a French deep-sea explorer and Titanic expert known as Mr. Titanic, George Hamish Harding, a very wealthy British businessman, pilot and adventurer, and the CEO of Oceangate himself, Stockton Rush, who would be the expedition leader during this deep journey to the Titanic. The journey would take the group of men almost 4,000 meters down into a completely different world, a world being crushed with immense pressure. The Titanic is 12,500 foot below sea level. To put that into perspective, 1,090 foot is the record for the deepest scuba dive, and anything over this would be extremely dangerous to the fragile human body. At 3,280 foot, the light disappears and you enter a world of darkness. At 5,280 foot, most animals that are not adapted to the high pressure environment cannot survive. 10,000 foot is the max depth a sperm whale can dive to, which is an animal known for its extremely deep dives. 12,000 foot is the average depth of the Atlantic Ocean, and the Titanic is still 500 foot deeper. This is an environment we know so little about. In fact, we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of the Earth's oceans. 12 people have walked on the moon, but only 3 have reached the deepest part of the ocean. At 12,500 foot, everything is being crushed by around 380 atmospheres of pressure, which presents significant engineering challenges. Space, on the other hand, is a vacuum and lacks atmospheric pressure. The engineering solutions are generally much more manageable. Space is also mostly empty and visibility is typically clearer over vast distances. Because of this, exploring space is generally easier than exploring the deep ocean. After all the final safety checks were completed on the Titan, they were locked in from the outside with industrial bolts and drills. It was moved onto its launch platform, which was moved away from the mothership, and soon after the Titan dropped into the water and began its descent. Stockton was in communication with the mothership during the entire dive down, giving and receiving information on their current depth, velocity, and general status of the mission. But at 9:46, the Titan sent its last message to the Polar Prince, and after that, things went silent. The Polar Prince was unable to receive anything from the Titan, but this was not unheard of, as it had actually happened a few times in previous dives. So without jumping to conclusions, the Oceangate team patiently waited for a response, but as the hours went by, they still heard nothing. The Titan was due to arrive back at 10 minutes past 6, but when this time came and went, worry began to set in, and the Coast Guard would be notified about the missing submersible. Over the next 3 days, one of the biggest search and rescue operations was initiated across the North Atlantic Ocean, specifically the areas around the Titanic. Remote-controlled submersibles were sent to scour the depths, while planes and helicopters would search from above. The main problem with the search was that the Coast Guard just had no idea where to look for the Titan. The sub was designed to ascend in case of any emergency, but things could have went wrong to prevent this, and with no communication, the location of the sub was anyone's guess. The Titan would only have enough oxygen for 96 hours, turning the search and rescue into a race against the clock. As the hours ticked by and turned into days, there was still no sign of the Titan. On June 21st, 2 days into the search, the Navy detected banging noises coming from the ocean. This was the first bit of good news and a beacon of hope that the men could still be alive. The search efforts were focused in the area the noise came from, but nothing would be found. The following day, the 96-hour timer would come to an end, but still the search continued, hoping that the men could have made their air supply last much longer. But just 6 hours later, reports started to come in that wreckage had been found on the seafloor near the Titanic. Wreckage that fit the description of the Titan sub. Once this news surfaced, the US Navy released a statement saying that around the time the Titan lost contact with its mothership, they had picked up an underwater anomaly that was consistent with a small implosion, which means when contact was first lost 3 days ago, the submersible imploded, instantaneously killing all 5 men aboard. It's speculated that the men may have known what was going to happen 50 seconds before the implosion, but it's also just as likely that it all happened too quickly for anyone to react at all. How could something like this have been allowed to happen? Well, the sad truth is that this happened in international waters, which is highly unregulated. Unlike commercial aviation, where there are regulatory boards involved and 1,000 different people and mechanisms in place to keep you safe, in international water it's completely different. Aside from registering the boat itself, there was nothing or nobody that Oceangate had to adhere to, apart from the rules that they set themselves. The Titan sub was designed in good faith by Stockton Rush, and he truly did believe that it worked as he advertised. And it did to some degree. Unlike other deep-sea subs, which 99% of the time are made from steel and titanium, The Titan was made from carbon fibre, which certainly raised eyebrows amongst engineers. But the Titan had already made numerous trips down to the Titanic without issues, so the technology certainly worked and possibly would have continued to work had one thing not been overlooked. Most deep-sea submersibles are rebuilt regularly to ensure they remain fully intact and durable to the crushing pressures found deep in the ocean. Over time, the constant pressuring and depressuring that these vessels endure will eventually weaken them so much until the inevitable happens. This could be exactly what happened on the Titan. It had already overgone its recommended lifetime and should have been rebuilt, but for whatever reason, Stockton Rush wanted to squeeze just one more dive out of the Titan, which would result in this tragic story. And for the boy who had his whole future torn away from him, I can't help but feel a profound and deep sadness for Suleman Dawood. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing, as I'd love to reach 1k. But until the next true disaster, it's goodbye from me.